Imagine the 21st century, if global warming accelerates. Where does the next superstorm hit? The next scorching heat wave? The next catastrophe? As the world warms degree by degree. The debate has ended. Scientists around the globe agree we now live in a world warmer by almost 1 full degree Celsius. Tracking the Earth's vital signs is an armada. Thousands of ships at sea. Tens of thousands of stations on land. Satellites monitoring from space. Scientists feed the data into the most advanced computer models to calculate what it means for our future. The predictions are alarming. In 4 decades, glaciers in the Himalayas, the source of water for millions, could be gone. Within 50 years, Greenland's melting ice sheet could be unstoppable. By the end of this century, the Amazon rainforest, home to half the world's biodiversity, could wither to an arid savanna. We're on the brink of 1 degree warmer, hotter than it's been in thousands of years. A temperature rise between 1 and 6 degrees Celsius is possible over the next century. Each degree means a radically different future. In some parts of the world, the first signs of global warming may be arriving with a vengeance. In Australia, bushfires are a natural part of the ecosystem, especially in drought years. But climate change may be pushing conditions from bad to worse. It rises into the atmosphere from the energy that powers all our modern conveniences. It's literally in the air we breathe. There are now 383 carbon dioxide molecules out of every million. It seems minuscule, but as the amount of carbon dioxide rises, so does the average temperature all over the planet.
Doubling of CO2 is a guarantee for global disaster. The dangerous level is about 450 parts per million, and we're already up to 383.
But the carbon impact of everything we do adds up.
I got to wondering, what's the carbon impact of something like a cheeseburger? Americans, all 300 million of us, eat an average of 3 cheeseburgers every week. And so that's like 150 cheeseburgers for each one of us every year. That's billions of cheeseburgers in the United States alone every year.
Among the scientists and other experts investigating climate change, Germain Cassio has staked out a unique territory.
I had to be able to calculate the numbers, calculate the actual solid, numerical, quantitative footprint of a cheeseburger.
The carbon footprint means all the energy that was consumed every step of the way for each of a cheeseburger's component parts.
When you look at the feedstock that goes to feed the cattle, growing the lettuce, growing the wheat that gets transformed into the bun, and milking the cattle, processing the milk into cheese, processing the cattle into beef, trucking all that stuff around, keeping it cold, it turns out each burger has a pretty significant carbon footprint of its own.
And carbon dioxide isn't the only greenhouse gas that's produced in the end.
But then it struck me, there's another critical part of the overall greenhouse gas footprint that I wasn't including. Methane. Methane from cattle. Well, the FDA calls it very politely enteric fermentation. It's what comes out of the cow. And methane, as it turns out, is the equivalent of at least 23 units of carbon dioxide.
Add it all up, all those cheeseburgers, and all that carbon dioxide, and you've got a very large number.
Pretty close to 200 million metric tons. 200 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent just from cheeseburgers in the United States.
If the world warms by 2 degrees, some changes to the biosphere are no longer gradual. Greenland's glaciers are disappearing. So much ice has melted, polar bears struggle to survive. Insects migrate in strange new directions. And as a temperate climate moves north in the US, pine beetles kill off the white bark forests, a grizzly bear's key source of food in autumn. New forests take root in Canada's melting tundra. The Pacific islands of Tuvalu are lost beneath the rising tides of global warming. This could be our world, plus 2 degrees.
At 2 degrees of warming, the impacts in the marine ecosystem are going to be much more severe.
The oceans are the planet's largest carbon sink, nature's primary mechanism for absorbing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But lately, there are indications these systems are breaking down. Alter the ocean's chemistry, and nature's primary mechanism for controlling the climate begins to break down.
You lose a coral reef, you lose perhaps 500,000 species. You lose those little coccolithophores, these little algae, and you start to lose things that are very important to life on this planet.
It took nature 150,000 years to make the great Greenland ice sheet that's now melting into the sea faster than at any time in history. As it disappears, rising oceans will flood coastal cities around the world.
One of the greatest concerns about what will happen if the planet continues to get warmer is the stability of the ice sheets. And the danger is that the ice sheet could begin to collapse very rapidly.
The consequences could be catastrophic.
The Greenland ice sheet actually contains enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by about 7 meters.
This could be where global warming becomes a runaway train. Warming accelerates the loss of polar ice. The loss of ice accelerates warming. More water from melting ice absorbs more of the sun's heat. If a rise of 2 degrees doesn't push the planet to the tipping point, if the world warms by 3 degrees, the Arctic is ice-free all summer. The Amazon rainforest is drying out. Snowcaps on the Alps all but disappear. El Niño's extreme weather patterns become the status quo. The Mediterranean and parts of Europe wither in searing summer heat. This could be our world, plus 3 degrees.
In a 3-degree warmer world, these kinds of summer heat waves will just be the norm.
During the heatwave of 2003, another little noticed phenomenon among Europe's trees and plants was unfolding, a kind of vegetation backlash. Photosynthesis was breaking down. Under normal conditions, plants and trees are a first line of defense against greenhouse gases, absorbing carbon dioxide, then converting it into oxygen and releasing it back into the atmosphere.
dried up Amazon tributaries in order to stop people dying of thirst in villages which are normally on the edge of this enormous river.
But beyond 3 degrees, the science of global warming becomes more and more speculative and more frightening. If the world warms by 4 degrees, oceans rise, overtaking heavily populated deltas, home to 1 billion people. Bangladesh washed away. Egypt inundated. Venice submerged. Glaciers disappear, shutting off the flow of fresh water to billions more. Northern Canada becomes one of the planet's most bountiful agricultural zones. While a beach in Scandinavia could be the next Saint-Tropez. The entire West Antarctic ice sheet could collapse, sending sea levels rising even further.
Drying up of some of the most important rivers in the world, and this will endanger the survival of tens and even hundreds of millions of people.
If the planet is ever 4 degrees warmer, the battle will be fought here, in the vast, crystalline ice fields of the Himalayan glaciers. The planet's largest store of fresh water outside of the polar ice caps. Beyond that, genuine disaster scenarios could become a reality. If the world warms by 5 degrees, 2 massive uninhabitable zones spread into once temperate regions of the northern and southern hemispheres. Snowpack and aquifers that feed the world's great cities, Los Angeles, Cairo, Lima, Bombay, are drying out. And it could get even worse. If the world warms by 6 degrees, from a distance the oceans may appear bright blue. But they are marine wastelands. Deserts march across continents like conquering armies. Natural disasters become common events. Some of the world's great cities are flooded and abandoned. This could be our world, plus 6 degrees.
Warmings of 6 degrees over longer time periods have been associated with some of the most devastating mass extinctions which have ever taken place.
Our lives would never be the same again. But it's not all doom and gloom. Yet. Most experts believe we can wake from the nightmare. These are still the early days of climate change. The longer we wait to do something about global warming, the harder it will be to solve. Only this time, at breakneck speeds, so quickly that most species won't have a chance to adapt and survive. The world's appetite for energy remains voracious. Our carbon footprint is staggering. As global warming escalates, it also accelerates. At some point, climate change could take on a life of its own, and global warming would become a runaway train. The only question is, now that we know about it, what are we going to do? Even the worst-case scenarios of 6 degrees won't mean the end of all life on Earth. But the planet after extreme global warming